Howdy do, everybody! Ready for another film review? Today we're delving into the depths of sci-fi horror. I know I haven't done a horror film in a while, so I think it's about time we revisit one. Today's film review is coming from the late 1990s, and I have to say it is quite baffling. And you'll see why. Today's movie is Sphere.
Looking back. Aliens. Who knows if they exist? There has been speculation after speculation as to what other life inhabits this galaxy. As far as I know, us humans have only been able to conjure up ideas as to what these other beings would look like. These creations have ranged from the very sweet, like E.T. the extraterrestrial, to the very ugly, like The Thing. And these beings don't even have to be the creatures like the ones mentioned. Look at the Star Wars franchise. So many imaginative designs were created for those films. It wouldn't even surprise me if one of those concepts was actually a legitimate life form. Whether it be illustrators, animators, or novelists, there have been several people in history that have brought their thoughts to the forefront of our fantasies.
Now, if I were to keep listing things, I might as well just stop because it'll never end. And of all the science fiction films that were made that can intrigue and baffle audiences at the same time, I think this one takes the cake.
Overall plot and writing. The movie starts off with Dr. Norman Goodman, played by Dustin Hoffman, a psychiatrist being brought to a naval base for a top-secret briefing. It is there he learns from Captain Barnes, played by Peter Coyote, that he and several other professionals that Goodman knows from different fields have been recruited in order to decipher what appears to be a UFO lying in the depths of the ocean. The other individuals hired for the trip are Dr. Elizabeth Halperin, played by Sharon Stone, a biochemist, Dr. Harry Adams, played by Samuel L. Jackson, a mathematician, and Dr. Ted Fielding, played by Liev Schreiber, a physicist. As they descend into the abyss in search of this strange presence, they learn the apparatus they will be housed in, and the limits of which they have to survive while under the surface.
Okay, I wouldn't have even made it that far. If they had told me that I'd be going down into the deep, dark waters, I'd be out. But even if I did make it that far, getting into that kind of setting would only doubly confirm the fact that I really should not be there. I really don't even care if the world's solutions was down there. Find somebody else braver than me.
When these highly educated and surprisingly fearless bookworms find and enter the alien vessel, they locate a couple of things, one of which is a pilot corpse, which is way out in left field, and the other which appears to be a perfectly shaped golden sphere. And like many humans would, we just can't help but reach out and touch the freaking thing we don't understand. This is exactly what Harry does when he decides he can't hold in his curiosity. It is only once Harry is retrieved from the craft that strange problems begin to emanate. The first warning of these foreboding signals was when the crew makes contact with a being from the ship named Jerry. Initially, the contact members have with this thing seems harmless, as far as they know. But Mr. Brainiac has a very thought-provoking counter-argument to that assumption that only he can effectively emphasize.
Well, don't you want Jerry to be happy, Norman?
I would be happy if Jerry had no emotions whatsoever.
So?
What happens if Jerry gets mad?
So some of the things that occur don't exactly make sense, but the real hook, line, and sinker is that line spoken right there. We as the audience don't even know what the protagonists are up against, and we have no freaking idea what the hell Jerry even looks like.
The story itself was originally a book of the same name by famous science fiction author Michael Crichton, the same guy who wrote for films like Westworld, The Great Train Robbery, The 13th Warrior, and of course his greatest achievement, Jurassic Park. The adaptation of the novel was done by Kurt Wimmer. For some, this can be a blessing or a curse, depending on your preference. Wimmer has produced a mixed bag of projects, with penning scripts to movies like Equilibrium, The Recruit, Ultraviolet, Law-Abiding Citizen, Salt, and the Total Recall and Point Break remakes. Like I said, some can be recommended while others not so much. The people actually doing the writing for this project, however, were two guys by the name of Stephen Hauser and Paul Attanasio. Hauser has only this film to his credit as a writer, which isn't a promising thing, while Attanasio has worked on bigger projects like Donnie Brasco and The Sum of All Fears. He's also the guy who was hired to do rewrites on the Hot Wheels movie being directed by Justin Lin. The director of this film was Barry Levinson, the man who directed Disclosure, another movie Michael Crichton was attached to, Wag the Dog, and Man of the Year, which, quite frankly, the parallels between some parts of the movie and last year's election still amazes me.
Now, with all that said, do the cast and crew members sound any way qualified at making this movie good? Most definitely. These are high-caliber actors. It's just the writing that's the problem.
What's great about the setup to this feature is the fact that there are so many enticing questions that need to be answered. These questions, along with Hoffman's character, turn this sci-fi thriller into a psychological horror film. That's awesome. I am all for going through a twisty, convoluted mind-bender, but it all has to make some kind of sense. The problem is that the explanations to these questions are anything but concrete and clear up practically nothing. That is really frustrating. A big one that still doesn't make sense to me is the dead pilot corpse sitting within the ship. Who was it? Does it matter? Should anybody even care? Well, presenting it on screen means it's significant for something, but that isn't even elaborated on in a distinct way. It's all speculation. Also, the scenes where the main characters more or less just weld themselves into the sphere isn't that straightforward either. What's going on? Is that their reflection? Or is it actually the character? Why isn't any of this understandable? Even the way a few of the characters were written weren't that coherent. This particularly is apparent when it comes to their history with Hoffman's role, specifically for the individuals Sharon Stone and Samuel L. Jackson play. Dr. Halperin has a mental issue that only Goodman is aware of because Halperin was a patient of his. Dr. Adams, on the other hand, just becomes oblivious as time goes on, and it looks strange when things are going all to hell and he's just sitting there reading a book or napping. This is partially explained, but again, not entirely made definite. And of all this, the biggest blunder the script causes to the experience is the deliberate move of placing title cards for every act that occurs in this movie. Simplistically, it's a chapter bookmark, and it does not do the execution any favors. Fade-outs to black saying, "the analysis," or "the monster," are rather obvious in their premise and have the capability of spoiling where the story could go. They even have unnecessary ones, like "the deep." Come on, really? Any viewer could have figured that one out. I feel like I'm watching a PowerPoint here. Who's the storyboard artist? Come on, I want to see some resumes.
If I was more apt to read the book and read by chapter, then I would have read the book, as the film was based on. Ask this guy. He's done it. He knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Actors and characters. The actors cast for the roles, for the most part, do a decent job. They are also well-known actors for numerous projects, so it's not like they're completely unknown to the public. What's great about how the story is constructed is that the protagonists are made of different fields. As a result, the interpretation of each discovery receives a well-rounded fact-based opinion. They also have distinguishable personalities because of their educational backgrounds. Of the cast, the most likable of the bunch is Dustin Hoffman as Norman Goodman. With his background as a professional shrink, his ability to read into others' responses and mannerisms are intriguing. Hoffman also tends to give his character a much more relaxed approach, even in tense situations, which makes him more likable. It's also because of Goodman that makes the experience a more psychological horror, because the audience mainly follows him.
Tell him we need to discuss this together alone.
Jerry. Shh. Jerry, use your words.
Let's just pull the plug.
Maybe he doesn't want to be left alone. He's been down here in isolation for 300 years. Maybe Jerry's lonely.
Lonely?
Hoffman was in successful movies like The Graduate, Rain Man, Dick Tracy, and the Kung Fu Panda franchise. Samuel L. Jackson as Harry Adams is another perplexingly smart character. There are so many times where Jackson is able to use his mathematical skills in order to solve problems. A real genius! But it's also he that is the toughest to figure out. His actions create a maze of contradicting evidence to his motives.
Kid? Figured that out yet?
It's a saturation effect, Harry.
I don't think so. If it was a saturation effect, it would be random.
What do you mean?
Well, this has a pattern. See? It's like a code.
A code from where?
You think this is coming from the sphere? If you were it, how would you know our alphabet? Same way it's configured on a keyboard.
But reflected in an orb, spherically. A keyboard, but spherical.
Ted, you the man.
Got it, Harry.
You still got it. You still got the juice. What we gotta do now is plug in the number.
Do I really need to say what Jackson has played in? This guy has been in practically every mainstream movie that has come out since 2008's Iron Man. But I'll go anyway. Let's see. The Incredibles, Unbreakable, Die Hard with a Vengeance, Pulp Fiction, and of course, Jurassic Park. The same could be also said for Liz Halperin. Since she was Goodman's patient, the thought of her being unstable is a possibility. She too makes some decisions that are arduous in comprehension. These two co-stars are the ones who contribute most of the psychological labyrinth that is this story.
Oh my. I jumped right into a school of these guys. Not this big though.
Would it make you feel any better if I told you this wasn't exactly a jellyfish?
What do you mean?
I mean, jellyfish like this are unheard of. I don't know what this is, but it isn't God's creation.
Stone is another hard hitter in big movies like Above the Law, Total Recall, Basic Instinct, and ended up with Catwoman, a cinematic dud.
Now, I'm not saying the characters Stone and Jackson play aren't likable. It's just that because they're so much more perplexing in their characteristics, they prop Hoffman's character up much further than that. These are far from boring characters, I'll tell you that much.
Liev Schreiber plays the youngest character of the Brainy Heads. His performance is comical in some ways because of his lack of understanding for certain things. Plus, being that he is a little younger, his eagerness comes through at times where it may be too hasty upon initial evaluation.
That image that you told me you saw on the monitor, from what you described, that sounds exactly like a black hole, a tear in
We know
space.
what a black hole is, Ted.
I don't know what a black hole is.
A black hole is a collapsed dead star that has so much gravity it acts like a huge vacuum cleaner, sucking everything into it. Light, interstellar dust, time.
Time?
It's possible, but not plausible.
It's more than probable. It's rudimentary astrophysics. We just haven't been able to fly into one and prove it.
Schreiber has been in movies like Scream, X-Men Origins, Wolverine, Salt, Creed, and most recently the Ray Donovan series. Peter Coyote plays one of those typical people who is more of a cynic and will only believe something when he sees it himself. If anyone else tells him otherwise, he is more thick-headed than your regular battering ram. He's probably the least likable only because of how much friction he tends to create against everyone else. I get that he's the man in charge, but a leader has to know when to be flexible. And this guy is about as bendable as a crowbar.
You're now online with an alien intelligence.
You gotta be kidding. You must have messed up the translation.
No, I don't think so.
If this translation is right, this alien sounds like an idiot.
Well, that's something to consider, a stupid alien. Well, I must have them.
Ask him for his last name.
What?
I want a full name for my report. I'm not putting in my report that I lost a crew member on a deep sat expedition to find an alien named Jerry. Please, Jerry?
Coyote was in movies like E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Erin Brockovich, and A Walk to Remember. Surprisingly, Queen Latifah has a minor role in this picture too. Latifah was cast as an assistant to Captain Barnes. She more or less handles the controls to various pieces of equipment. Not much else was done with her in particular, and Latifah's acting is very controlled here, which is appropriate considering the role and situation.
Sir, I'm still getting no reading on the sub. Forget the goddamn sonar, Teeny. When Beth and Ted get here, keep your eye on them. Make sure they don't go anywhere, all right?
All personnel descend sub 1, engaging lock area.
Descend sub 1, you are now depressurized.
Latifah was in breakthrough movies like Jungle Fever, The Bone Collector, Chicago, and Just Right. Even Huey Lewis has a very brief appearance as a helicopter pilot in the very beginning, who brings Goodman to the ship out at sea.
What kind of work do you do, sir? I'm a psychologist. Hey, a shrink, huh? Yeah. Why not? They've called in just about everything else. What do you mean? Physicists, biologists, mathematicians, you name it. Everybody being flown to the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean.
What's the point? I don't know. Was Lewis just trying out his acting chops? Could be. He was already in Robert Altman's Shortcuts in 1993, and before that played himself in Back to the Future. Really though, his most widely known film under his belt was Duets in 2000, which was obviously after this movie. I think he should just stick to making good tunes though. Not to say he's bad at acting, but his music is better, because that's what he's known for. However, this minor casting choice is strange to me. Next I feel like I'll be seeing Michael McDonald somewhere in another movie.
No wise
I have to say, I think that would be pretty amazing, but I think that's wishful thinking.
Horror and cinematography. Taking into account that the majority of the characters brought into this story have a scientific background of some sort, this movie could also be placed in the sci-fi genre. However, because this movie tends to play out more like a horror film for much of the last half, I can't help it but categorize it like that. The cause and effect these characters put on themselves have some pretty nasty results. And I don't mean blood and guts. In all honesty, the gore is almost non-existent here. There are some sequences that are fairly brutal, but nothing where people explode or get turned inside out. Sorry, gorehounds. Yet I don't dismiss them as a pleasant sight. What ends up happening to some individuals is gruesome enough when thought about for too long. On top of that, as I mentioned before, there is a psychological angle the story throws at us, and it is really effective at turning the audience on its head.
1 minute you think you get it, and then the next time they throw a wrench in the story, and then you completely get thrown off again because it contradicts exactly what you thought you just confirmed. I really don't even understand what happened still. Really? That's a good thing? And a bad thing.
The cinematography by Adam Greenberg was definitely a credible component to the picture, working on motion pictures like The Terminator, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Sister Act, Rush Hour, Inspector Gadget, one he might not want me mentioning, and Snakes on a Plane. It's not surprising that what's shown on screen looks good. The underwater scenes are all displayed realistically, even decades later. Anytime the camera is inside the submerged vessel, things look pretty spacious considering anywhere outside of that is nothing but ocean depths. The special effects that are mixed in with that are well integrated too. This goes for the problems that occur within the submersible ship itself, or what goes on outside underwater. The sphere plot device also looks pretty good, but its presence isn't exactly menacing in any way. It just sits there, acting all shiny and crap. It has an interesting design with little ripples that come off of it, but that doesn't say a whole lot about it.
Really, this sci-fi horror film does have a lot visually going for it, but plot device-wise, it really could have used something a lot more threatening other than a liquid glowing golden globe.
Soundtrack and film score. After viewing the film itself, another element that had a beneficial effect on this movie was its film score. Composed by Elliot Goldenthal, the film score to this picture has pieces of horror and thriller cues inserted throughout its runtime. With Goldenthal having a background in creating scores for several horror and action films, this genre seemed not too hard for him. The problem was the release of the score. Only containing a whopping 36 minutes of music from a full 2¼ hour film is just useless when it comes to collectors who want to enjoy the music that belongs to it. And with that said, although the music works within the realms of the feature, listening to what was provided to us on its own is a different experience entirely. There are a few tracks that work independently, but the rest kind of feel empty in their delivery because it can be tough to figure out what scene they belong to. The score itself, though, sounds very organic in construction. The instruments used are what you would find in your everyday orchestra, with deep strings, horns, percussion, and flutes. The strings are used mainly for the ocean depths, while the percussion is for the action horror-related sequences. For some of the psychological horror that occurs, Goldenthal also incorporates some piano keys that give an uneasy atmosphere to the whole situation. Here are some tracks. Goldenthal has scored other movies like Pet Sematary, Alien 3, Demolition Man, Batman Forever, Heat, SWAT, and Public Enemies.
Normally I don't recommend scores that kind of hit middle of the road, which this one kind of does for me, but the only really way you're going to understand what I mean is if you were to listen to it on your own.
Overall impression. Was it a flub or a job well done? What can I say? There are a bunch of things that work here. The music, camera work, and actors cast for the roles all do an effective job trying to bring the story together. But that's where the root of the problem is. The narrative brings up some great mysteries within its runtime, but hardly any of it begins to make sense. The ending itself feels like it's telling us, yeah, it's best you forgot it. I don't want to be told that, and neither would any other viewer want to. It should be remembered for its enticing story. It just didn't finish it, as unfortunate as that is.
Besides, if someone else understands it better than I do, I'd be happy to learn from them. I'm sure the book would explain a lot too, but it also depends on how much it was adapted into the film. I'm also looking for a film reviewer's perspective anyway. So if you understand it, let me know.
You know there was an attack on this place.
No, I must have slept through it.
You know, you seem strangely detached given our predicament.
I don't know, Norman. With all your panic and running around, what have you accomplished?